My father told me to stay silent about my brother sleeping with my wife, promising it would boost his political career. I disappeared for 15 years, but I never forgot. And now I've returned to destroy everything. You know, sometimes life just hands you a curveball so brutal it redefines everything you thought you knew about betrayal and injustice. I spent 15 years as a ghost, forced to disappear from my own life, from my own children, all because of a family secret so deep it could shatter political careers. But then, one ordinary afternoon, a face from my past walked right into my new world, and suddenly everything I'd buried came roaring back to life. Just the other night, my buddy Bill Chapman, his voice heavy with pain, was trying to explain how he'd just found out his wife of 25 years had an affair. The other guys, our lifelong friends, rallied around him, all chiming in about the crushing cost of divorce if he went that route. We'd all been through the Marines together, a bond forged in fire, and they'd welcomed me into their circle shortly after I landed in this small town. I mean, I literally threw a dart at a map 10 years ago, and it landed on SPM right there on the coast. So I packed up my life, showed up, and with this brand new offshore LLC I'd set up, I bought out the only grocery store for miles. I didn't just buy it, though. I poured my soul into that place. Within a year, I had it licensed to sell alcohol, and I'd tripled its size. The gas bar came later, and the store carried absolutely everything anyone in a 1,000-person logging town could possibly need. Now I've got 8 full-time staff, 6 part-time. It took me another year after that to even start building my own place. I'd snagged this piece of land from a tax sale, right on the edge of town, and designed a log home. My 4 Marine brothers, they spent hours helping me sketch it out. And because of their work at the mill, I could buy the raw logs, bark 'em, myself, at wholesale prices. Saved a ton, let me tell you. Ended up with this incredible 3-bedroom log home overlooking the whole village, the entire coast. Just breathtaking. The only thing they ever gave me grief about was that I was, as far as they knew, a lifelong bachelor. Never married, never even dated since I moved here. The rumor mill, oh, it worked overtime. Labeled me as private, though nobody had ever seen me make a single pass at anyone. The women in town, they respected me, but they quickly got the message. This guy's a bachelor, and he's staying that way. I was just someone everyone could trust. And they did. Everyone had questions about me, of course, but they learned pretty fast I was a private man, not spilling much about my past. I'd even set up the LLC so the company handled all the taxes. Anything I took out for myself came from retained equity, so my personal tax returns showed 0 income. Paid for everything in cash or debit. Didn't even own a personal credit card. The only real difference was, I went by my second name, Charlie, instead of my first. The sign at the entrance to our village says, "Next stop, Japan." Nobody knew I'd actually come from New York State all the way to the Washington coast because of my past. Sometimes I'd just sit there and wonder, what kind of person names a town SPM? After our second beer that night, we broke it up. Bill's eldest son, Steven, was coming home from university, bringing his fiancée with him. Bill's wife, Connie, was driving all the way to Seattle to pick them up, and we were all invited to a barbecue that Saturday to celebrate his graduation and engagement. Bill wanted to be sober, wanted to be waiting when they got there. He didn't want his future daughter-in-law thinking he was just the town drunk, you know? Steven had landed a job with one of the biggest investment firms in New York. We all knew how incredibly proud Bill was. I was the last to arrive at the barbecue, as usual, half dreading it, honestly, fearing one of my friends' wives would have dragged someone along in their never-ending quest to set me up. They treated it like a game, dying to know if I was straight or not, and their ridiculous curiosity only fueled the rumors. Connie, Bill's wife, saw me pull up in my old restored Ford truck, my absolute pride and joy. "You've got to meet Steven's girlfriend," she called out, a huge grin on her face. "She's a redhead. Jennifer is 22 and she's got 2 sisters and 3 brothers." The moment I met her, it hit me, like a punch to the gut. One look, and it was clear she was someone you wanted to know. Connie, ever so observant, leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I wanted to warn you," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Because we both know when you see a redhead, you tend to get quiet and distant. I've often wondered if it was a redhead who scared you in the past, but I don't know because you won't open up about anything. Just grab a cold beer before you join us in the backyard." I grabbed a cold bud, my hand shaking slightly, and headed out. The whole crew was there, all their kids, and then some. Steven spotted me, sprinted over, and wrapped me in a bear hug. He thanked me again, for what must have been the 100th time, for covering the cost of his education. He pulled me into the crowd, beaming, ready to introduce me to his girlfriend. When he called her name, Jennifer, she turned towards me, and my face, it went absolutely pale. My body stiffened, tense. It was like seeing a ghost. My first instinct, honestly, was to run. I wasn't sure if I could even stay, if I could face the past that was about to explode right here, in front of everyone. Jennifer was like a mini version of her mother, one of a set of identical triplets. The last time I had seen her was the morning I caught her mother, my wife, with my brother, in her master bedroom. I was so nervous I couldn't even speak. Like her mother, Jennifer was a natural redhead, with a body that just exuded confidence. At 5'6", she was striking, with curves that absolutely demanded attention. Too much looking at her could make any man feel completely overwhelmed. When she saw me standing there, her baby blue eyes lit up with joy, and tears, real tears, started to flow. But it was her big, wide smile that told me these were tears of pure happiness. I was on the verge of losing it. The pain, the grief, the immeasurable loss. It was all staring me right in the face. Seeing her as this beautiful, grown adult, it just slammed home how much of my children's lives I had been forced to miss. "Oh my God, I don't believe it!" Jennifer exclaimed through her sobs, her voice choked with emotional joy as she rushed toward me. "You're alive! I never could accept that you were dead!" The silence around us grew heavy, almost suffocating. Everyone wore looks of absolute shock, unsure of what to say. They had to be wondering what the hell was happening as Jennifer launched herself into my arms. Everyone was just trying to process the sheer magnitude of the moment when Stephen, bless his heart, broke the silence. "You know Charlie, his full name is Jonathan Charles Barnes III. "I know," Jennifer choked out between her sobs. "He's my dad. I would recognize his face anywhere." The family had always said he committed suicide due to economic problems, but something had always felt wrong. My Uncle James, who became my stepfather, he'd always just go quiet whenever we asked about him. That was his way of hiding the truth. I wrapped my arms around her, squeezing her tightly as she buried her face into my neck. Tears flowed, not just from her, but from both of us. It had been 15 years since I'd held one of my daughters like this. At that time, she had been just 7 years old. The love I had kept hidden for so long, it just exploded. Our emotions, they just let go. Everyone heard our sobs, and I knew they expected an explanation. I took a moment, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to calm us both down. "I was banished by my family," I said, my voice hoarse, still holding Jennifer close. "Banished to keep their lies hidden. It was all about maintaining the family's public image, their honor. I was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement and just disappear." I paused, took a deep breath. This all started when I returned home unexpectedly one day. I found my brother with my wife, Jennifer's mother. I had just dropped the girls off at school and came back for my briefcase. Important files. I witnessed their interaction before I left, and I captured it on video with my phone. When I confronted them, they just laughed, like it was nothing. My voice cracked. After I showed that video to the judge, my family decided they needed to clean up the mess to protect their political careers. They actually believed my brother could marry my wife. Said it would benefit his ambitions. My tears started again. Marrying a widow with 3 daughters. They thought it would be an advantage for him. For over 15 years, I've been like a ghost in my own family's narrative. If fate hadn't intervened right here, right now, no one would have ever known the truth, I said, my voice stern, yet still trembling. In my wildest dreams, I never thought the truth would actually come out like this. The shock on everyone's faces was palpable. A few looked like they were going to be sick right there. I noticed Connie, Bill's wife, looking down, trying to hide her shame, her own tears. I could see she was starting to understand for the first time the true consequences of her own conduct through the eyes of another. Little did she realize that once the genie was out of the bottle, nothing would ever be the same. Only those who had truly gone through such struggle and separation could understand this kind of hidden pain. Holding my daughter in my arms, for the first time in years, made me confront the unintentional, devastating consequences of a family's hidden truths. At that moment, I felt a deep, profound shame myself, and my tears once again started to flow. For me, and for my daughter, our mutual healing had just begun. My grandfather, he always said there were only 2 things that truly mattered in life, money and power. Everything else, he'd say, was just plain trivial, and he had both. My first mistake, I realize now, was not going to talk to him right away after discovering the situation with my wife and my brother. I was emotionally distraught, completely shattered at that time. The judge, you see, was being considered for the Supreme Court. A scandal like that would have absolutely ruined any chance he had. By the time I finished telling him what I had discovered, his legal mind was already scheming. He was figuring out how to resolve it in a way that those events would never see the light of day. He watched that video, and to the end of his life, I had never heard him express so much frustration. His first phone call? To my wife's father, a senator from Maine. He explained to Raymond Thompson what I had caught, what I had recorded, and I just texted him the video file. Joan's father, his anger was clear. He was not impressed. Said he'd catch a private jet out. They both agreed nothing would be done until the 3 of us talked it all out. Before making the next call, my grandfather, with this cold, stern look, he turned on a program to record the conversation he was about to have. Then he called my wife. Listening to only one side of that conversation, the names he used for her would have seemed comical if I hadn't been thinking of using them myself. He came down on her with the weight of a ton of bricks, making it crystal clear that she and my brother had been acting unbelievably immaturely. "If this gets out," he thundered, "your father's career is over and so is mine. None of this would be happening, Joan, if you had learned to make better choices. James's family and the mass media will eat it up. Reporters will be screaming scandal on the front page." He put his finger over his lips, signaling me to be quiet, then put the phone on speaker. He asked Joan if her 3 daughters were actually mine. She said yes. My grandfather, his voice laced with venom, replied, "Well, how do you know for sure? Perhaps since you've shown yourself to be untrustworthy, we should have blood tests done to confirm." Joan became animated with anger, snapping back that her involvement with James didn't start until 3 years ago, trying to make it clear there had been no others. The judge, relentless, questioned, "Why should anyone believe anything you say?" She even pointed out that she was on birth control because she didn't want more children, practically suggesting that James might not have been the only one she had been with. My grandfather then asked, "Do you love James?" She said, "I have always loved him, but it has now changed. I used to love him the way a woman should love her husband, but now it's more like a sister loves her brother." Those words, they felt like a knife twisting in my heart. The judge could see my pain. It was as if she had physically stabbed me. Joan continued, her voice devoid of emotion. "I guess James and I are at fault for that. If I had worked as hard at the marriage as John did, this would never have happened." She claimed James saw her attraction to him even before John and I married, and he deliberately pursued her after he moved in. She explained they had let their attraction lead them astray, and eventually she gave in to his constant attention, with James staying with us while John was on his many business trips. "Our desires drove us to where we are now," she said. "At first it was strictly physical. We didn't realize until it was too late that we had developed feelings. By then we didn't want it to end. We were satisfied keeping it hidden from his brother, and we didn't think through our actions. I believe it was never our intention to hurt John." Sadly, I could tell from the sound of her voice that she felt absolutely no guilt, no remorse. There wasn't even a hint of regret. She wasn't ashamed of being caught. My grandfather, he saw the tears streaming down my cheek. My world was crumbling. He then asked again, "Do you love James?" Just to confirm. Joan said, "Yes." After John caught us, James asked her to become his wife, and she agreed. My grandfather, his voice dripping with disgust, replied, "So James has taken away from his younger brother, his wife, his children, and his life. What kind of man could do that to his younger brother? What kind of woman would allow that to happen? How could either of you do that to another human being? Do you think John deserves this?" Joan's response was chilling. "We won't deny. John has right to see the kids when our schedule allows it, because James is planning a run for political office. So, whatever we end up doing, it has to be handled quietly and delicately. Publicly, James will have to become their new father, while John will be the distant uncle. As you know, the courts are still reluctant to grant sole custody to the father." My grandfather then said, his voice cold as ice, "I guess the only thing I have left to say to either James or you is that once we resolve this matter, I never want to hear from either of you again. In my eyes, both James and you are dead." He slammed the phone down in anger. I had never seen him that mad. After a long, heavy silence, he looked at me, his eyes piercing. "Remember the hurt, the pain, and your loss. They have made it clear that you have been written out of their lives and your children's lives. It would be better for everyone if you were dead, because that's how they view you. What they dismiss means more to them than you do." He paused, then added, his voice low, almost a growl, "Do you think they set themselves up to get caught? To my eyes, it sure looks like they did. If that's true, then that's cold. The day will come when your chance at revenge will arise. When it does, show them no mercy. Take no prisoners, but leave them ruined and alive. Remember, they always return to their past mistakes." He cursed, then added, "Damn it. I wouldn't have believed it, but she is truly conniving. She should have become a politician." With that, my grandfather drove his fist into the wall, breaking his hand. "Remember, Jennifer," I whispered, still holding her, my voice thick with emotion. "It was never my choice. The two families decided it would be best for everyone. After listening to the phone call your mother had with the judge, Joan and James had put both sides of the family's careers and lifestyles on the line. I understood that they had to be protected. I told her, I can play that conversation for you later. It will explain a lot. But right now, we need to calm down and enjoy the rest of this special day. Jennifer lifted her head off my shoulder, kissed me tenderly on the cheek. As she separated from me, she took my hand, turned to her future husband, and said, Stephen, my love, thank you for bringing me here. It brought my father back into my life. Then she looked at me, her eyes shining. Dad, don't leave without talking to me, okay? Kissing her gently, I agreed. The barbecue somehow was back on. After gulping down the rest of my drink, I let out a big burp and everybody roared with laughter. I heard Jennifer comment, "Now that's the dad I know." Bill and I headed back to get a couple more cold drinks. Jennifer was always close to Stephen, but her eyes, I noticed, were constantly on me. "You amazed me," Bill said, shaking his head. "Here I am, crying in my beer last night because of my wife admitting she made some poor choices. And you sat there, not saying a word. Now I understand why. What you went through, it makes my situation feel minor. It gives me a whole new perspective on how you handled it. Are you willing to give me some advice?" I laughed, a genuine laugh for the first time in ages. "Make Connie go through marriage counseling with you. Tell her you need to understand what led her to make those choices before you can fully forgive her. Each session will reinforce the importance of understanding what happened." I noticed it when I explained why I hadn't seen Jennifer in so long. "Connie still loves you, Bill. That's why she feels so guilty. This period will allow both of you to bring closure, where healing and forgiveness can truly last. Oh, and by the way, I definitely approve of your son's choice for a wife." That made us both roar with laughter as we returned to join the party. We had all pretty much cleaned up everything Bill and Connie had prepared when Bill stood up, with Connie at his side, to get everyone's attention. "Most of you don't know this," he began, his voice filled with pride, "but our son Stephen graduated debt-free, thanks to a private scholarship provided by our good friend, and my son's future father-in-law, Charlie." He paused, then looked at Jennifer, his smile wide. "Jennifer, welcome to the family. If you have half the character and wisdom your father has, my son is definitely a blessed man." Connie, her eyes shining, added, "Remember, always in your journey as man and wife, that you're only human. At times there will be situations caused by the other that you feel can't be overcome." Bill and I thought we had reached that point, but we found some very wise advice as a result. We will be seeking outside professional help. Remember, it's easy to say, "I'm sorry," but it's not so easy to move on without understanding why something happened. Never let your pride get in the way of your marriage. Everyone nodded in agreement and then proposed another toast for them. Later, as I made my rounds to say goodbye, Connie came over to me, planted a kiss on my cheek, and whispered, "Thank you for getting my husband to give us a second chance. We will be seeking counseling to try to work it out. My family owes you big time." I looked around for Jennifer, but she was nowhere to be seen. So, I walked into the house, heading for the front door, when I noticed 2 suitcases by the entrance. "I hope you're not leaving without me, Dad," my daughter said, her voice filled with a playful challenge. "Steve agrees with me that since we are home, I should stay with you. It will give us a chance to get to know each other again. After all, we both expect my real father to be the one that walks me down the aisle." I lost it again. Just completely broke down. And let me tell you, it was a hoot watching her drive my old Ford home. She'd never driven a Standard in her life. I just watched, mentally calculating the cost for a new transmission because she kept using the clutch as a brake, and her inexperience caused her to grind the gears pretty horribly. The double S-curve gravel driveway, winding up the hill to my house, it absolutely blew her mind. She stalled out at least 5 times. It made me laugh, a deep, genuine laugh. Yet it was such a simple memory, one I knew I would treasure for the rest of my life. As soon as we got into my home, I started up the wood stove to take the evening chill off the place, then gave her a royal tour after planting her suitcases in what was now going to be her room. By the time we had finished the tour, she was completely in love with my log home. Each of the bedrooms, you see, they were designed like they were all master bedrooms, each having their own bathrooms. The open kitchen with a pantry off to the side, the open floor dining room and living room, it all made the space appear absolutely huge. We saved the office or the computer room for last. That's where I could let her play the conversation my grandfather had recorded so many years ago. After listening to it, she asked if she could get a copy, so I copied it to a stick and gave it to her. I also copied the video of them together. She noticed, with a sharp intake of breath, that the files were originally made 2 days before my reported death. I left her there crying and grieving, knowing she was experiencing a whirlwind of emotions, from love to anger. The raw truth of hearing the voice of someone you care about, proving that everything they told you was nothing but lies, had to absolutely destroy one's trust and faith. I went into the kitchen, poured us each a glass of wine, and sat on the Osai couch facing the window, watching the village lights twinkle below. When she finally came out to join me, I noticed the puffiness of her tear-swollen eyes as she sat down beside me. I took her in my arms, just holding her, not saying a word. The glasses were almost empty before my daughter finally spoke. "All my life, I've been told they drew closer as they grieved your death until they realized they had fallen in love and then they got married. It was the biggest wedding that year in the state," Jennifer said, her voice cracking. "My own mother's voice proves everything they said about it was nothing but a lie. I still have difficulty understanding the coldness of both towards you. I wonder if it was done out of hate." Mother claimed she loved you until you died. And it makes me question if anything they said to us was true. It's going to take time for you to work it out, I replied, my voice gentle. Heck, I still don't understand it all. Even worse, there may not be an acceptable answer as to why. I paused, then added, almost as an afterthought. Their marriage may not even be legal. If that comes out, James's re-election bid for the Senate will go down in flames. I continued, I have a copy of the non-disclosure agreement I had to sign with the judge and your mother's father. It details what I had to do and why it had to be done. I will give you a copy before you leave. They took your children from you and changed our lives in ways we may never fully understand. She replied, her voice tinged with bitterness. It's like they were acting as if they were gods. The one thing I don't understand is why you let them. First of all, they manipulated me, I said, sighing. My grandfather believed until his dying day that they had it all planned. They counted on the fact that the rest of the family on both sides had too much to lose and would do anything to cover it up. Their family's own long-term conduct proved them right. So, for your mother and my brother, there was no downside. As a result, they got to keep everything. My former business lost a lot of its reserve cash. My ex took the corporation public and converted my equity into shares to raise much-needed capital. It was out of sight, out of mind, as far as the public was concerned. Both the judge and your mother's father transferred offshore money into a new LLC set up in my name only to help me start my life far away. I explained that Joan and James knew the family, with enough money, could find a way to make everything disappear. They banked on that fact, and time has proven they counted on it. So now everything I do is managed through the LLC, which means I have no personal income to declare. This was done to make it harder for anyone to trace me. The international corporation isn't a tax-free haven, and every income one draws comes from retained earnings. My computer room is where I manage the LLC and its many investments, which have done very well. I explained that my grandfather had told me the day would come when the truth would finally emerge, but I had to promise him I would wait until it did. Only then would I truly be free. He said it would be the truth of what happened that would take the two of them down. Now that you know, I said, looking at her, when I walk you down the aisle, many will see my face. There's no way they can hide it. Their past will begin to unravel, becoming a very public scandal. The business here gives me the appearance of having a normal life. Our wedding is set for August 6th, she said, her eyes gleaming. They have already rented the hall, booked the church, and sent out the invitations. Grandfather Barnes was to walk me down the aisle, but when he hears about our conversation, he will gladly give up his spot for you. I want to have the information released the last Sunday before my wedding and have the search for your death certificate begin. I want those two to pay for what they have done. She paused, her gaze unwavering. Do I have your permission to tell your father that you're alive when the conversation is finally released? Yes, you can tell my dad, although I believe you might already know that I am still alive. I paused again. The answer to the second question is quite simple. Your mother and I have not gotten a divorce. I replied, I may not be legally dead, so I'm not free to remarry. In my heart, I could not deliberately allow my desires to hurt another. The price I had to pay was to lead a single life. The morals, principles, and standards I have would not allow me to be like them. I told her it had finally sunk in because Jen's face showed pure surprise. For the first time, she saw the difference between her mother, my brother, and me. It registered in her mind that the difference was like night and day. Dad, she said, her voice filled with a sudden, fierce protectiveness. You have been imprisoned. They stripped you of your life and your children. They made it impossible for you to have a new family. You were put in a box and forced to play their games by their rules. You are free, but it's restricted just the same. Does that make sense? Yes, it does, I replied, a heavy sigh escaping me. But it was also my mistake, because I could have refused to go along. Instead, I decided to put the needs of both families first. I left her and walked back into the computer room, pulled down a huge binder from the shelves built into the wall, and returned to her. I placed the binder in front of her and told her to start looking while I refilled our glasses. Jen was absolutely amazed. It was a binder filled with all her life's memories. Every announcement, every public appearance, every place she was in, copies of her report cards. I had captured everything I could in her walk of life. She was surprised by how much she had forgotten. We talked into the early hours of the morning as she shared her thoughts on those memories I had never mentioned. She went to bed that night knowing she had always been loved by me. I told her that I had a binder just as full for each of her sisters, which I hoped one day I would be able to share with them. She stayed for 2 weeks, splitting her time between Stephen's family and me. By the time she left, we were closer than we had ever been. I felt truly blessed to have her back in my life. On July the Sarah, the order went out for me to short the stock of the company I had formerly owned. Its current value was $129 a share, and I was gambling with my future. By the end of the day, I owned over 1 million shares. Jennifer's mother was the current CEO. All my original shares should be in my trust for my children until they reach the age of 25, as it had been set up, but it could have been changed when I left 15 years ago. They had estimated the company's market value at about $45 a share. Bill, Connie, and I would be flying out the following Thursday via a private jet I had booked. Jennifer had kept her vow of secrecy but called me daily to keep me informed using Stephen's phone. My stockbroker had been instructed to continue buying shares each day until August 5th, and only sell the shares that were bought at the highest value to cover the margins needed on that market day. The conversation between the former judge and my wife hit the airwaves Sunday morning, along with the video of Joan and my brother, together. An online platform crashed because the video became that hot. The media picked it up, big time. By the end of the day, there was an all-out search for my death certificate or record of divorce and any related documentation concerning the settlement of my estate. Questions arose about how I was supposed to have died. Had I been murdered? It was 7 on the West Coast when my daughter called, 11 p.m. in New York. She thought the news coverage was a blast. Her mother and stepfather were in panic mode. Jennifer's sisters, Judy and Joe, had been trying to get clarification from their mother about it all, but Joan and James were refusing to answer any of their questions. One of the questions they asked was, "Is our father still alive?" Jennifer then said the second bombshell would be released overnight. Those who had read it said, "It appeared that I had been made to disappear with James and Joan Barnes's direction. The accounts and funds the family promised me seemed to have been sent to non-existent entities, raising suspicions that I had been set up for harm." She then said she would call my father into his office and hand him the cell. I could hear his office door close as my father said hello. I responded, "Hello, Dad." "John, is that really you?" he asked quietly, his voice a mix of disbelief and hope. "How are you, son?" "Yes, it is. I'm good. Jen can fill you in. How is Mom?" "How much do you know?" he asked. I responded that we learned about the situation about a week after the news of your passing and why they felt it was necessary. "We're a bit older now, but we're both doing quite well, all things considered. You'll be proud to see how well your daughters have turned out. But tell me, how did Jen figure it out?" "She found me by chance. It turns out her intended is the son of a good friend. His family hosted a barbecue to introduce her and celebrate his graduation from university. When Stephen brought me over to her, she recognized me right away, and we have been in contact ever since. I mentioned that I needed to stay out of sight until the wedding. So I'm flying in Thursday night with the groom's parents and family. Do you think I can remain safely hidden if I arrange for a helicopter to drop me off at your estate? I'll make sure the landing pad has the lights on, and we will give the staff a few extra paid days off. Your mom will be thrilled to prepare some meals for us. Just let Jen know your time of arrival." My dad mentioned after a few words that he wasn't going to tell my mom. He wanted it to be a complete surprise. Early Monday morning in the European markets, according to FBN, the share values of my former company had dropped over $20 right at opening. I picked up another million shares for $11 each, buying them short. That afternoon, after watching the values continue to drop, I placed a buy order for 4 million shares at $45 each, trying to get it to bottom out and sell off all the shares I currently own at $65 each. The mass media frenzy, with CNN taking the lead, was absolutely damaging to James and Joan Barnes, affecting everything associated with them, including accusations of serious misconduct. James Barnes, being a Republican, allowed CNN's Anderson Cooper to speak out passionately, taking full advantage of the situation. CNN's ratings soared, and they had a large group of reporters stationed at their front gates. Based on what the mass media had uncovered, the FBI announced an investigation into my disappearance on Thursday morning. My former corporation announced that their CEO, Joan Barnes, had accepted a buyout. Everyone knew she had been forced out as her association with the corporation was harming them. The stock share value began to stabilize at $35 a share on Friday afternoon, and the stock began to climb. However, personal problems for my brother James Barnes began to unfold. He was now facing a Senate ethics investigation, and there were hourly calls within the Senate and the media for him to resign. In his only public appearance, he reiterated that he and Joan had become seriously involved only after my reported passing, and that the conversation between the former judge and his wife must have been fabricated. The video of them together had to have been created later. CNN announced they would conduct a voice audit to verify the voices of both parties in the conversation. They uncovered a recording of James publicly stating that I had committed suicide and pointed out that to date, no death certificate had been found. On Friday, Jen's father announced his sudden retirement from the Senate due to ongoing health issues, and his daughter's long-term conduct had contributed to his decision. The shares of my former company closed on Friday at $59. My purchase of the shares at under $45 was confirmed at dusk on Thursday night. As the helicopter began its descent, I could see my parents walking out of the back of their house to greet me. After the pilot shut down the engine, I got out from underneath the spinning blades and picked up my suitcases. Once I cleared the rotating blades, I straightened up, allowing my mother to see my face. My dad had to support her as tears and shock overwhelmed her. It had been over 15 years since I had seen them. Mom kept crying, saying, "My baby has come home." She spent the next 2 days acting like an overly protective mother, trying to spoil me because I looked so lean to her. Home-cooked meals had never tasted so good. At 5 minutes to 2 on Saturday, Jennifer stepped out of the church, signaling for me to leave the limo. As I walked up the steps toward her, a CNN reporter caught me on live camera and asked who I was. I turned and said with a straight face, "I am the Walking Dead." Then I walked up to stand beside the bride. Jennifer looked stunning. After exchanging kisses on the cheek, we walked in arm in arm, each of our faces showing pure pride. The cameraman captured it all. I caught Joan's image from behind, and wow, she still looked great as she led the bridal party down the aisle. She didn't look half bad from that angle. She had a figure that anyone would admire. Next came the ring bearers and the flower girls who made sure to drop rose petals as they walked. Joan was next, then Judy was just ahead of us. I told Jennifer to relax, which caused Judy to look back. I raised my index finger to my mouth, signaling her to remain quiet. Judy mouthed to her sister, "You found Dad," fighting the tears that wanted to flow just before entering the main area of the church. Jennifer just nodded her head, her face shining with joy as she looked up toward Steve. I noticed that everyone had to be asking themselves where the best man was. Little did they know, he was walking his bride down the aisle. I watched Joan take her seat beside a man I assumed must be James. If it was, time had really changed him. He now had the typical dad body with a bald spot on his head. Both Jennifer and I watched as Joan ascended the steps, taking her place, then turning towards us as tears started flowing. She put her hand over her mouth to hold back her emotions. It was almost as if she believed it couldn't be real. Then, Judy stood beside her, holding her hand while whispering in her ear. She too joined her sister in shedding tears. I let go of my daughter and watched her climb the steps until she stood beside Stephen. "Who gives this lady away?" the father said. I replied, "Her mother and I do." Then I went and stood beside Stephen. It was a beautiful ceremony. Many would say it was the most emotional ceremony they had ever seen, because the tears of joy flowed from my 3 daughters' faces. I couldn't help but notice that my daughter's mother and my brother's faces were completely pale. Neither of them could look me in the eyes during the whole ceremony, their gazes directed downwards. During the evening festivities, I was asked numerous times how I had come to be my son-in-law's best man. Had I introduced the two when we signed the form for registration for the marriage certificate? The Catholic father was shocked when I signed my formal name. Almost all the witnesses of this marriage who had known about me now knew that I was alive. Though nothing was said, I could tell that cell phones were being used all over the place. We would later learn there had been 3 live feeds. The judge and the senator, by the end of that day, had set the plans into play. Both saw the situation as a mess that would scandalize the 2 families in every way. Having served in the Marines until just after the birth of the triplets, it was decided I would be called back in. For over 3 years, I was hidden in plain sight, fighting the Taliban with brothers in arms. There wasn't a mission that I would not volunteer for. They said I had been driven. I gained a reputation for being very dedicated, but it was faulty body armor that finally did me in. As a result, I had 8 bullet scars across the front of my chest. I barely escaped with my life. After getting my discharge papers, I was a major no more. I went to the Cayman Islands to reorganize my accounts before deciding what to do with the rest of my life. The judge and my grandmother met me there at the family estate. It was my grandmother's idea that if I could not figure out what to do, I should make it a chance for discovery by throwing a dart on a map and seeing where it led. That questionable suggestion had brought me here. The congratulatory line was amusing. Judy and Joan stood on either side of me, introducing me to everyone and milking it for all it was worth. Pride was glowing from their faces, yet I did not feel comfortable in the tux. Joan and James were the last to pass through. Stephen was polite, but Joan wasn't. She appeared to be in total shock. "Mom, you should know Dad did not find me. I found him. It was me who had all the information about what you both did. Dad reluctantly allowed me copies of it, so I could prove to my sisters what truly had happened. He had no clue what I was doing. What James and you did to all of us is unforgivable. I decided it had to be set straight. I had to prove he was not the failure you both made him out to be." Joan was furious. Her anger made her want to scream, but she held her tongue and walked away without saying a word to me. Joan was likely asking herself if her daughter was trying to destroy her life. James stood for a moment, looking at me before saying anything. "We need to talk. We need to work this out," he said softly, trying to figure me out. "Working on that as we speak," I replied. "But you know I was there, listening via speaker when the judge and Joan talked," I responded without offering my hand. James looked at me in shock, as if he had no clue. "I will show you both as much consideration as you showed me, which we all know was none. You made your bed, now live with it," I said in a stone-cold voice. "I'll enjoy watching the fallout." We stood there watching the couple as they headed out the door. My 3 daughters saw a big smile on my face. Steve said, "Oh, something's up." I just laughed, knowing that as soon as they got off the church steps, the 2 of them would be served. Joan was being served with divorce papers on the grounds of adultery, and James for alienation of affection. It would be captured by the mass media again. The nightmare for them was going to get a lot worse. It was time for us to get to the park for the pictures for their wedding albums. So the bridal party climbed into a big limo. On the way over, while sharing a glass of champagne, Jennifer explained everything to her 2 sisters who were holding on to me tightly. They were surprised to learn that Jen had stayed with me for 2 weeks while she got to know her in-laws. My 3 daughters had grown up to be very beautiful ladies, and they made me so proud. Jennifer explained how we had gone through all the things I had collected about her throughout the years. She said she got the impression that I knew more about her than she remembered about herself. Then she added, "He has one on each of you just as thick." It proved to me, Jen said, that he never stopped loving us. The only awkward moment during the photo shoot was the one with all the parents, all 5 of us. We got around it by having Connie and Bill between the rest of us, but they could not get 3 of us to smile. James and Joan were not in a good mood. Their world was collapsing fast. My identity was now out, and the mass media was having a field day. "The Walking Dead is alive," became the mass media cry. Everything they thought they knew was being rehashed, like the Democratic media always did. Everything was being taken to the extreme. The bridal dinner was over the top. Then it came time for the toast. As the best man and father of the bride, I threaded it with tact. I explained honestly how, thanks to his good parents whom I considered best friends, we had developed a close bond and that I saw him as the son I never had. I went on to explain some of the comical situations we put ourselves in and how they had drawn us closer. I admitted that I was taken by complete surprise when he introduced me to his bride. I finished it off by saying, "I hope they had the wisdom to catch on to and hold on to all their dreams." My mother's face glowed with pride when Stephen stood up. I almost lost it. He started out by saying, "It's rare that a groom can say that his father-in-law is his best friend. Jennifer's father paid for my post-secondary education and has advised me through a lot of rough times. It was a shock to us all that day in June when I discovered that John was Jennifer's real dad. I'll never forget my own father's words when he said I had to be a blessed man to have Jennifer becoming my wife. To both of my fathers, I want to say thank you for making me the man I am." When the bride and groom started their dance, they owned the room. To this day, I have never seen a more beautiful bride. Judy and Joan kept me on the dance floor, both wanting to share as much time with me as possible. Outside of my mother, they controlled all my time. The master of ceremonies came out on stage to announce it was time for the bride and her father to dance. "Before we do that," he boomed, "with the bride and groom's approval, I would like to give General David Bloomberg the mic." The general stepped forward and said he was here to give 3 medals to Hard Hat Charlie. I had to laugh. Hard Hat Charlie was a major in charge of a platoon of SEALs. He said they had gone into a mission that is still classified today, only to learn upon arrival that it had been an enemy trap. Our intelligence about the situation had been totally wrong. The 2 platoons sent with them were also trapped. They were surrounded. When under review of the botched mission, it was said it was like a modern-day Custer's last stand. After 2 days of heavy fighting with our forces near exhaustion, word came down the line to load up their bazookas to the max and pass them down the line. An average Marine can carry one of them with all their gear. Hard Hat Charlie had taken off all his clothing and gear. He had nothing on but his bulletproof vest, his helmet, boots, and his underwear. Everybody roared with laughter. Everyone around him told him he was crazy, but he said to his second-in-command, "Win or lose, if we don't gamble, we are all going to die. Since to all I love, I am already the Walking Dead. At least I will die with my boots on. I must give my men a fighting chance." He loaded up his body with 2 of these bazookas. After throwing a bunch into a clearing, he put his helmet on, stuck a cigar in his mouth, stood up, moved into a clearing, and let those babies rip. His first hit was on an ammo reserve, which caused multiple explosions to spread everywhere, sending the well-hidden enemy scrambling. After firing a few more shells, he turned around and fired into pre-selected sights up the hillside. He was hit 23 times while still firing before he went down, but only 8 of them were serious. The enemy's back was broken because of his actions. They ran like the dogs they were. Each man who served with him to this day swears he alone saved all their lives. So I am here to present 2 Purple Hearts and 1 Silver Star to Major Jonathan Charles Barnes III. My only regret is that I could not do it in front of his unit. I walked up and the general pinned them on, then saluted me. My parents and 3 daughters were so incredibly proud. My daughter Jen finally led me to the floor for the father-daughter dance. She had chosen an old 60s song, and it was a very emotional dance for the 2 of us. When they announced the mother-son dance, I went over to get my mother, joining Stephen and Connie on the floor. You could see how much it meant to her. It was evident on her face. Later, the bride and groom stepped away to change into their going-away outfits. And when they returned, Jen found an envelope lying where she sat addressed to the couple. Inside was a cashier's bank draft made out to them for $2 million, along with a note that said, "Follow your dreams." Jen saw it and started to tear up. My signature was on the draft. I slept in until almost noon on Sunday morning after finally getting to bed around 6 a.m. following the wedding reception. Judy and Joanne had taken me to a late-night Chinese restaurant for a meal. Both girls wanted some private time with their dad before we called it a night. We had exchanged phone numbers and current addresses, and my wonderful daughters had arranged to come and spend a couple of weeks with me back home. After a shave and a shower, I dressed in my usual attire. Blue jeans, a white t-shirt, and a long-sleeve blue shirt left unbuttoned, hanging down the sides, paired with black socks and inexpensive running shoes. Brand names and high fashion didn't impress me much. I felt richest when dressed like this, driving my old Ford truck. I was just a simple man living a simple life. I came down the stairs to find a house full of family. Mom and Dad, Bill and Connie and the rest of their brood, all 7 of them, and my 2 daughters. Connie was telling my daughters how I had saved their marriage and shared how for over 10 years, all our friends had tried to figure out if I was straight or not. My father, though not a religious man, had the patience of a saint. He never gave any of us a hard time when we tried to set him up. We were all totally stunned when Jen called him Dad because until then, we had no clue. We thought the most important thing in his life was his 2 black female cats. After saying hello to everyone, I went to the kitchen to grab a coffee and light up a cigarette. Mom joined me, asking what I wanted to eat. I told her I wanted 6 pancakes, 3 soft eggs with runny yolks, and 4 slices of bacon. She was thrilled and started pulling out her pans. The cooking staff got out of her way. They knew she was cooking for her son. Dad came in as I sat there, catching me up on what was going on. It seemed the mass media was having a field day. The headline in the New York Times was, "The Walking Dead is alive." CNN had been telling the story of my historic military record and had interviewed some of those I had served with. Most of them said they were surprised I had lived after being taken down. My dad had to laugh when one of them remarked that the one thing you never said to Charlie was that it couldn't be done because he would always find a way to do it. He seemed to enjoy getting his superiors frustrated. As a leader, he would only push his team as much as he pushed himself. And under his direction, we all became better men. It turned out that Joan was married to 2 brothers with no record of a divorce. I had to have been one of the longest publicly known individuals in a complicated situation. They said that Senator James Barnes had paid a high price when he got involved with her. I couldn't hide my smile. CNN had an afternoon special promoting that lifestyle, and feminists were cheering her on, praising her for the choices she had made. But even their comments were being criticized. A news crew had been sent to interview people in our little town, and most had nothing but good things to say. It was amazing how things escalated just for a few minutes of fame. Dad laughed and said the media had blown this up and really made a mess of it, the way they mishandle things. By the time this is done, the country will think you're a saint, and you won't have even said a word. Both Joan and James are in a tough spot. I got up and refilled my coffee just before Mom brought me my plate, then sat across from me, watching me eat. She was still working up to the point where she could accept that the baby of the family had come home. Dad said, "Joan mentioned that your brother is claiming he had no knowledge of what Mom said to the judge because he had gone looking for you. Do you think that might be true?" "Who knows?" I replied, shrugging. "We know that for 3 years she was involved with him behind my back. There's no way we as humans can remember everything we said or didn't say. They must have discussed the consequences of being caught and what they would do if that happened. Your mother felt secure enough to say what she did that day. She was mentally prepared for what unfolded, and her choice of words proves that. Either way, they expected the family would handle it. The 2 of them used us all." "Oh, God," Joan said, shaking her head. "You looked at it not in a personal way, but in the way it affected everyone in the circle around them. That paints a different picture. So, who worked it all out, Mother or James?" "James has never been a leader. Even in the Marines, he played it safe. Your mother and I are both go-getters, willing to take risks, so it had to be her." I replied. "Jennifer told me that your gift last night, if managed properly, would set them up for life. She wouldn't tell me how much it was, but she asked me to tell you that they are investing it for 5 years because they don't want to end up in a situation and you never know until it's revealed what people with money and power will do. On Saturday, your mother was served. It's time we got divorced," I said. "Your sister is being very wise. When your sister and you get married, you will get the same amount," Joan replied. "When did she receive the papers?" Joan asked. "The moment she left the church. James got served too. I'm suing him for alienation of affection. Either way, it's complicated." I paused, letting that sink in. "I got the family trust frozen because I am not dead. Everything in it will be dissected by the lawyers. If they put their own money in because of what was done, I may get theirs too," I said. "James will have to pay a few million to settle the suit," Joan said. Joan looked at me without speaking for a moment, then said, "The house they're living in is owned by the trust. I think everything they own may be in a tough spot. It's a mess, that's for sure. I feel sorry for us all. Lawyers are going to end up taking a lot regardless. This was done to protect those who no longer need protecting. Sadly, it's always the innocent that get hurt." I noticed Judy had been listening to the conversation and seemed to have something on her mind. When she asked if she could talk to me privately, I wasn't surprised. With Dad's permission, we slipped into his office. "Dad," Judy said, her voice hesitant. "I've got a female friend whose ex-boyfriend has been abusive in the past. She has court orders against him, and he has been jailed a couple of times. He's set to be released again next week, and we're both afraid he's going to come after her again. She's an RN I work with, and we share an apartment. She has started an 8-week holiday and has some money in the bank. Mentally and emotionally, if it wasn't for her work, she would be a complete wreck. She needs to be in a spot where she feels safe and secure. I think she needs to get away. She was at the wedding last night, and for the first time in a long time, she showed a lot of interest in a man who, she said, carried himself confidently. Would it be okay if I introduced her to you?" "Of course it is, but you know we fly home tomorrow. So what are you really trying to get me to do?" I asked, a slight smile playing on my lips. "From what Jen told us about her 2 weeks, with you and how you both interacted, I want you to take her back home with you. It sounds like the perfect situation for her to be able to completely heal. Bill and Connie are great people, so I know she will fit right in," Judy said, her eyes pleading. "If you won't do it for her, will you do it for me?" "She's that important to you?" I said. "So who is the man she is interested in?" "Yes, she is. I see her almost like an older sister who should have been with a good man. Long ago. The man she is interested in is you." She laughed, a bright, hopeful sound. "With your past, I know you can keep her safe." "Dad, are you trying to set me up?" I laughed back. "Remember, I've reached the age where I'm old enough to know better. You can answer that for yourself." "She'll be here in an hour," she said with a big grin. "Remember, Dad, age does not matter. The things a man will do for his daughters. Joan and I had married right after she got out of high school. Her father had introduced me to her when he was doing an overseas tour. I was in my second year of college, and she was 15. For me, it was love at first sight. I joined the Marines with my father's influence and permission at 16. I took to it like a fish to water and excelled. My drill sergeant said I was mature beyond my years. Being mentally tough and determined allowed me to move up the chain faster. The only thing I found difficult was continuing my education while living in the barracks. Thankfully, schoolwork had always been easy for me. I graduated with my degree in 3 years instead of 5. I had 6 years in when the twins were born and got my first discharge when they were 2. I considered myself a young 44-year-old father. My dad always said I was an overachiever and was willing to finance my company, and away I went. Thanks to the rise of computers, in 4 years, my brokerage company expanded across North America. I was always traveling for business. I must admit that I was a bit too hands-on. Dad and I were in the backyard shooting a few hoops when Judy came out with her friend. As we watched them walk toward us, I noticed Judy's friend had long, natural, blonde hair. "She has a wonderful figure, just like your mom," Dad said with a chuckle. "I appreciate when they're built for comfort rather than speed." I learned that Barbara Ellen Patterson was 33, had never been married, and had grown up in a small town in Ohio. She was 5'9", which made her 3 inches shorter than me. She had broad shoulders and could play a great game of hoops. She and my dad made quick work of Judy and me after a couple of games. The ice was broken, and we began chatting like old friends. After talking for a bit, I excused myself and went into my dad's office to make a few phone calls. I finally opened the door and called for Barbara and Judy to come in. I told Barbara that I had one of the directors of the local hospital on the line. She's being offered a full-time position in the emergency department starting in a month if her references check out, which based on what you've told me, I assume they will. If she accepts, she can catch a ride with me when I fly home tomorrow and stay with me until she finds a place. It will be up to you to help her sort out anything she can't take with her. The pay won't be as high, but the cost of living is lower. Judy hugged me and gave me a big kiss on the cheek. "Thanks, Dad. I knew you would come through. I had discussed this with Joanne, and she thought you would too. You've made it possible for her to finally put the past behind her. Thank you for helping her move forward." Barbara accepted the position, and the change that came over her was amazing. Her true, warm, and loving nature began to shine through. It was a joy for all of us to see. My dad, being a lawyer, drew up a power of attorney which would allow Judy to act on Barbara's behalf. I suggested to Barbara that she set up a new email account and share it with everyone she wanted to keep in contact with, informing them that she would send her new phone number via that account and keep them updated. Within a week, Barb, Judy, and Joanne were thrilled. They rushed out the door to help Barbara prepare to go. The plane took off at 4 and landed at port just before 8 hours. Connie and Barbara bonded on the way, while Bill and I talked about how impressed he was with my parents and my daughters. He advised me to be careful, because Barbara was the kind of person who valued commitment. The stock value of my former company was now at $13. Tomorrow morning, CNN would receive a sealed envelope containing my death certificate and the location of my grave. It was just after 9 p.m. when we arrived in SPM. I drove by the small hospital so Barbara could see where she would be working before heading back to my home. The farther we got from the East Coast, the happier Barbara seemed to be. As I drove the truck up my driveway, I realized I needed to get a second vehicle. SPM's population was now about 3,000, and was evolving into a small tourist town. "Seeing my home for the first time," she said. "I haven't been in a log home since I was a small child." Before taking her luggage, we walked out to the front yard so she could get a view of how my home looked over the village below with the log mill, the boats, and the docks, and the endless view of the Pacific Ocean. It was a postcard image, and she was in love with it. I told her that dusk would come between 9:30 and 10 by. As we entered the house, I told her she was the second person I had ever had stay in my home. Neither of us knew at that time that she would never leave. I was up before Barbara Tuesday morning. It still amazes me when I reflect on how refreshed and beautiful she looked as she walked down the stairs. It was as if she had stepped out of the clouds into sunshine with no makeup on. She wore blue jeans and a tank top. She fit right in. "Coffee's in the air, sleepyhead," I said. "Sugar's on the counter. Half and half is in the fridge." "Good morning to you too," she replied. "Anything new in Charlie's world today?" "Let's turn on CNN and find out," I said with a smile. I flicked on the TV with the remote. As I watched her pour herself a cup and check what was in the fridge and cupboards, she noted we needed to do a major grocery shopping if she was going to do any cooking. I heard her say to herself, "It's a beautiful house, but it needs some personal touches to make it feel like home." It reminded me of something my mother would say. CNN was having a field day after receiving the death certificate. They discovered that the signature on it was from a doctor who had a questionable past and was currently serving time. A news crew had been dispatched to the site known to have been used often by organized crime. When Barbara saw me smiling, she said, "You knew?" I had to admit I did. I then said, "The judge set this up long ago to protect himself. After he died, I inherited his estate in the Caymans. I realized he was going to make them pay. I had the caretaker mail this information in." She laughed and said that Judy, Joe, and she had spent most of Sunday night and Monday morning discussing everything about the situation they were in. They were all in agreement that Joan and James were getting what they deserved. "All of your daughters seem to dislike what their mother did," she said. "Your daughter made it perfectly clear that if I did anything to hurt you, I would be held accountable by her. All three of them think you're amazing." I had to promise Judy daily updates on how we were getting along. Barbara said, "When I told her Saturday night what I thought about you, after the general spoke, she started to plan. I asked her why she was doing this, and she said, 'My dad's a good man who needs a good, honest woman in his life.' After our coffee, let's drive over to Port so you can get your Washington State driver's license, apply for your nursing license, and do some major grocery shopping if that's okay. They have a Golden Corral there, so we can have an early lunch. That sounds like a plan for the day. If we can stop at the hospital so I can go to the Human Resources Department and fill out an official application," I replied, handing her my phone. "I need to get our legal address saved in the memos." After stopping for coffee before we got on the road, she asked if she could drive. I let her, and she had a smile a mile wide. She handled the clutch like she had been doing it all her life. When I said I was surprised at how well she was doing, she told me she had been driving tractors since she was 9. If you're in the country and aren't driving a standard, it's like saying you won't amount to much. After lunch, we hit the hospital and got that done. Then went to the state local office where she was told her new licenses would arrive within a week. Then it was off to Walmart. The groceries we bought filled the truck. I hadn't expected the new copper nonstick pots and pans, a complete set of dishes for 12, or the new silverware. Her explanation was that my basic kitchenware showed I just didn't cook, which was true. While she was in the hospital's HR department, I called my insurance provider. So our last stop was at the local Jeep dealership where I picked up a fully loaded brand new Jeep 4x4. My insurance agent faxed over proof of insurance so we could drive it home. She drove it home, following me all the way. When we got home, she let me unload the groceries, then told me to get out of her way and leave her alone so she could properly set up the kitchen. As soon as the dish soap was unpacked, she used it to wash down every cabinet before unpacking a single thing. It was as if she was setting up a new house. I watched her in amazement as she organized the kitchen, making it her own. I should have seen the warning signs, but I was oblivious. I went into the living room and turned on the news. If it wasn't so sad, I would have laughed. They had found my gravesite and were asking if I was alive or who was buried there. It would take the FBI to answer that. I heard Barbara's cell phone ring and listened in, gathering that it was Judy getting an update. I yelled, "Tell Judy you haven't assaulted me yet." Barb responded, "Your daughter says you can be a real pain." I laughed, knowing that was too old for her, and that was that. It was almost 10 hours before she was done. To celebrate, I poured us both a large glass of homemade blackberry wine and watched the twinkling town lights below until we went to our separate beds. I awoke to the smell of bacon being fried. When I came down, the coffee was made, and Barbara was wearing a homemade full-length housecoat with a matching nightgown. I commented that it was hand-stitched and asked how long it took her to make it. She said 2 months. "How did you know?" she asked, surprised. I replied, "Because you can't buy that quality in any store." She smiled and said, "I like a man who notices little things." Breakfast was almost ready. 6 pancakes, 3 eggs, and 4 slices of bacon for me with warm, pure maple syrup. I asked how she knew that was my favorite. She said, "Your mother told me, but you can place the eggs on your own pancake." She laughed. "So what else did my mother tell you?" I asked. She smiled, saying, "That's for me to know and you to find out." I smiled to myself. I could get used to this. I told her I was going to check in at the store and pick up the plates when I paid the taxes on the Jeep. She said that was fine because she had found the tape measure in my toolbox in the pantry and was going to measure for blinds and curtains. Before I left, she gave me a kiss on the cheek and said, "Just remember dinner is at 6 and always will be when I'm not working." Then it hit me. She was trying to make this a home, not just a place to sleep. I returned at noon and put the plates in the Jeep before heading inside. Barbara told me the good news. The FBI was digging up my gravesite that very afternoon. We both wondered what they would find. It had been discovered that my death certificate had been issued the day before I had re-enlisted. CNN was carrying it live. I received a text from the lawyers asking me to call. It turned out that Joan wanted a quick divorce with the trust situation dealt with separately. She would not contest the grounds of infidelity as they believed that, if they went that route, the time for the divorce to be granted would be shortened since she was already remarried. I told them to proceed and Barbara said I was making the right move. She mentioned she was done measuring and that we needed to discuss material options and pricing. "Why?" I asked. "Because this town is growing, and it won't be long before other homes are built that may allow them a direct view into yours. Also, finishing off the house will add value." For the next 4 hours, we discussed each room and ordered the items online. After spending a considerable amount, I asked her if she expected me to hang them when they arrived, and she said yes. That's a man's job, but she would help. She figured she better check in with Judy, and we were glad she did. Judy had inside knowledge about what they found in the coffin. Wrapped and taped in bubble wrap for protection was a sealed envelope. Once it was open, it contained a note saying, "Next time, James and Joan, when you try to harm someone, make sure the person you hired is competent." It was signed by me. When I heard that, I couldn't help but laugh. When Barbara got off the phone, she asked for an explanation. So I told her that before I left to report, the judge had me sign a bunch of blank pages as if I was signing a letter. What they found must have been one of those. Barbara was just about to start dinner when I got a call letting me know all my friends and their spouses were on their way to welcome her to the neighborhood. I told her not to bother starting anything because we were about to have a house full. They wanted to welcome Barbara to our village in a group. Apparently, Connie had spread the word that I had brought a classy lady back with me, and my daughters had approved. All the ladies wanted to meet the woman who had caught my attention. They joked all night that they had to see it to believe it. Charlie had finally found a girlfriend. Within 10 minutes, the group arrived, and I proudly introduced Barbara to everyone. We were having a potluck dinner, country-style fried chicken, baked beans, nachos and cheese, potato chips, fries, coleslaw, fresh buns, 2 cases of beer, and pecan pie. All the ladies loved Barbara's selection of dishes. After introduction, she quickly fit in, discussing the curtains, blinds, and rods she had ordered, saying they should arrive on Friday. It was decided that Saturday afternoon we would all get together to put them up, but she insisted they bring nothing because she would prepare a meal for us all. Early Thursday morning, we went to a superstore in Port. Barbara wanted a large propane barbecue, a deep fryer, and a smoker with the necessary tanks. We ended up buying a patio set that would seat 8 with 8 extra chairs and arranged for delivery the next day. I bought pre-cut lumber to build a couple of tables. Friday morning, I started building her an outdoor cedar table that, when collapsed, would stand against the back wall, but would be used as the main counter for serving food when pulled out. I stained it to match the wood of our log home and protected it in the same way. She loved it. Thank goodness Ace Hardware pre-assembled it. It saved a lot of time. Saturday at noon, they brought their ladders, and the 5 of us guys soon had the curtain rods set up in all the rooms. We let the ladies hang them. I had to admit in front of them all that Barbara had a great sense of design and style, which made her smile. What we had done made the house look that much better, and I acknowledged it. I laughed because Barbara blushed. Bill pointed out that I was going to need a garage and a storage room for the patio items before the winter weather set in. I had to agree, but if I was going to do it right, I wanted a protected pathway with a mudroom for coats and boots, all made with logs. Barbara said we needed room for 2 freezers. I groaned, and Connie caught it, saying, "Are you already planning for more kids?" I blushed, and everyone laughed. "Poor Charlie, he's already henpecked and doesn't know it," Connie joked, and everyone roared again. Barbara had smoked and slow-cooked 20 pounds of ribs, made a huge potato salad, and prepared a quick shredded pickled cabbage relish. And a regular salad. It was a hit with everyone, so all the ladies had to find out how the cabbage was made. To reward her for all her hard work, I made her breakfast on Sunday. Then, with friends, we took a cruise up the coast. Seeing her enjoyment in what we were doing, I made a note to take her to Seattle for some whale watching and to spend a day at the market. When Judy called Barbara, she privately admitted that she was in love. I felt the same, but I wouldn't make a move. I was too old and saw myself as too set in my ways. It had been an interesting week. We had over 3 evenings designed and laid out the plans, and my 4 best friends enjoyed teasing me about being in love. No matter how hard I argued, they knew I was in a challenging position. The rock removal company would be coming next week to start leveling the additional space. By the time they were finished, we would have county approval for a 4-bay garage, a built-in storage area in the back with an in-law apartment on top, and a 16-foot walkway leading to the large mudroom. James and Joan had been called into the FBI. Rumors suggested it wasn't going well. The investigation had narrowed down to 2 possible suspects who may have been hired to carry out the plan against me. It was difficult for them because of a lack of concrete evidence, and both were under scrutiny. On Friday, I received an interesting phone call from the president of the company I had founded. He wanted to know, as a major shareholder, if I would be interested in becoming the new CEO. I asked if I could have a week to think about it, and he agreed. Somehow, the news leaked out, causing the shares to rally, rising to $139. Then, late Saturday, a very loud thunderstorm rolled in. I didn't realize it then, but it would change our relationship forever. The storm hit in the middle of the night while I was lying in bed, listening to the heavy rain on the metal roof. Suddenly, my bedroom door opened just as a huge flash of lightning illuminated the room. Barbara walked in, wearing a slim, almost sheer nightgown that barely covered her. She was a sight to behold, her silhouette framed by the lightning. I pretended to be asleep as she pulled the sheets back and crawled in beside me. Her body trembled in fright. With the next thunderclap echoing off the walls, she pressed tightly against me. I could smell the sweet scent of fresh soap from her shower, with hints of lavender filling the air. The closeness was overwhelming. Turning sideways, she slid her leg over mine, wrapped her arm around my chest, and laid her head on my shoulder. I hadn't been this close to a woman in years, and I was a nervous wreck. As she raised her head to kiss my cheek, I turned toward her, and her lips met mine. A gentle kiss turned into a slow, lingering exchange, fueled by our emotions. It became a night of wonders and whispers as we made up for lost time. It wasn't just a physical connection. We were truly making love. In the afterglow, we admitted our feelings for each other. It was almost 10 a.m. when hunger finally compelled us to get out of bed. I went down to brew some coffee, dressed only in my pajama bottoms. While waiting for it to brew, I called my daughter Judy. "Dad!" Judy exclaimed, surprised. "It's good to hear your voice. I have to ask you something. What did Barb say to you during Jen's wedding?" I replied that the moment she saw you in the wedding party, it was love at first sight. The more she learned about you that night, the more she felt her feelings were real. She watched you all night, and ever since your return home, she's been on cloud 9. "Whatever you plan to do, don't hurt her," Judy said, concerned. I chuckled and said, "Just between us, she slept in my bed last night, and this morning we admitted we're in love." Judy got emotional, so I told her I would let her go and talk to her later. The coffee was almost ready, so I cleaned the French press and warmed our cups. Just as I finished, the doorbell rang. It was FedEx with a special delivery for my lawyer. My divorce certificate. The court had waived the waiting period due to extenuating circumstances. I was officially free. Barbara was coming downstairs, her face glowing with happiness. Her cell phone rang, and she answered. Within seconds, she burst out laughing. After a moment, she ended the call. "That was Judy," she said. "She had a question for you." "Oh, and what was that?" I asked. "She asked if it was okay if she started calling me Mom," Barbara replied, giving me another kiss. "You just had to tell her, didn't you?" I laughed. Barbara said, "I had to make the first move because you never would." She was right. I had seen myself as too old to fall in love again. I poured us both our morning coffee and walked over to the kitchen table. After mixing mine the way I liked it, I grabbed Barbara's cup as she headed toward me. When she saw the letter from my lawyer, she picked it up and read it. The second page was the certificate. She looked at me, tears of joy in her eyes. I got up and held her in my arms. "Is it time for you to meet my parents?" she asked. When I said yes, she called her mother to ask if they still did family gatherings on the family farm during Labor Day weekend. When she said yes, she told her that she would be coming home for it, and her mother was thrilled. Instead of having it on Monday, she explained that they would be gathering on Saturday because others had plans for that Monday. Judy and Joanne were both out before the end of summer, and we spent one day going through their binders. Both daughters and Barb were surprised by how much I had documented about their lives. We flew into Cuyahoga County Airport where we had a rental car waiting. After settling our luggage, we booked ourselves into a Holiday Inn. It was a beautiful September day, and the plane was scheduled to pick us up the following Tuesday. Barb hadn't been home in 2 years, but she warned me that both her father and 2 brothers had served in the military. And since I was the first man in her adult life she was bringing home, I would surely be put to the test to see if I was good enough for their only daughter. The next morning, she drove us to the farm. We arrived early, and I figured this because we were the 3rd vehicle in the yard. Her mother rushed out of the house to greet us before we even turned off the car, clearly shocked that her only daughter was with a man. Hearing the commotion, her father came out to see what the fuss was about, and I was taken aback to find out that her father was Bullfrog Patterson, my old drill sergeant. The first words out of his mouth were, well, I thought, like all the new recruits, that he was just a troublemaker. Barb, what are you doing with this guy? He laughed, holding his hand out to me. He cost me over $1,000. I was supposed to break him and get him to drop out, but instead he excelled despite me. He became one of the best Marines I've ever trained. I couldn't help but smile. Bullfrog, I said, as Barb and her mom looked at me in surprise. I wanted to have a serious talk with Barbara's father because I wanted to ask for his daughter's hand. I had no clue he would react that way. Are you serious? Mrs. Patterson asked. Yes, ma'am, I replied firmly, noticing Bullfrog's smile grow wider. You've got it. John is my only reply, he said. My only daughter couldn't come home with a better man. With that, I got down on one knee, pulled the ring box out of my pocket in front of her parents, and asked Barb to marry me. Completely surprised, she said yes. I stood up and slid the ring on, praying it would fit. It did. Then I gave her a big kiss. After a round of congratulations and warm welcomes from her parents, her mom said, let me grab the keys to the truck, and we'll do a quick run for beer. It'll give us a chance to talk. Barb's mom was emotional for 2 reasons. Her daughter had come home with a man her father approved of and had gotten engaged right on the spot. Our first stop was the local Legion for a couple of drafts. Bullfrog asked if I had finalized my divorce, and I confirmed that I had. I explained how I had met his daughter and how our relationship developed. He knew I came from a good background, so he didn't need to pry. He introduced me to everyone, proudly as his future son-in-law. Someone asked how he got the nickname Bullfrog. I explained. He was our drill sergeant for basic training, and it was his job to weed us out. Since I joined at the age of 16 with my parents' approval, he felt I really didn't want to be there. He came down on me hard. Every little mistake meant extra punishment. One night in the barracks, one of the guys said, man, you're really in for it. What do you think of him? I replied, he reminds me of a bullfrog sitting on a log trying to catch bugs. The problem is, in his eyes, I'm the bug. The guys loved it, and it stuck. We spent a couple of hundred picking up beer and rye. I knew Bullfrog would make sure I was so intoxicated by the end of the day that I wouldn't be able to drive. By the time we got back, the yard was full of cars. We took some of the beer and rye to the house, then drove Bullfrog's truck around to park it for easy access. As we arrived, Barb and her mom greeted us. Just then, a voice in the crowd yelled, son of a hat, Charlie, is that you? I looked up to see measly Mike. Old dog, how in the hell are you? It's good to see you, brother. Within seconds, we were giving each other a big brotherly hug, knowing we were still good friends. Bullfrog looked at us and said, you know each other? He's the best tech I ever had working under me. I replied with a big grin. Bullfrog asked, why did he call you Hard Hat Charlie? When I re-enlisted, I started using my second name and made it to Major before I was discharged, I explained. I got that name from my SEAL team during what would end up being my last mission. So, you're the Charlie who saved my son's life, Bullfrog said, his voice thick with emotion. We both nodded in agreement. Barb walked up, stood beside me, and whistled to get everyone's attention. She introduced me to everyone as her boyfriend and then said, my mother has something to say before we continue with the party. Turning to me, she whispered, I'm keeping the keys because if I know my dad and brother, you're going to be too intoxicated to drive. Barb's mom, Gloria, spoke up. I wish to officially announce the engagement of my only daughter, Barbara, to retired Major Jonathan Charles Barnes. She came home because Jonathan wanted our approval before he asked our daughter. My husband trained him and said he was one of the best he ever had. It took him no more than 20 seconds to give his blessing. As soon as he got it, he got down and proposed right in front of us. Everybody seemed stunned, but Mike said, you're going to be my brother-in-law, repeating it as if he was trying to convince himself it was true. For the next hour, Barb introduced me to her extended family. She admitted it had been a long time since she had seen her family look so proud. And she was right. They definitely got me drunk. I had no idea how we made it back to the hotel. I couldn't remember half the night. I had to ask my future wife if I had made a fool of myself. She summed it up by saying, you outlasted the other 2 guys. As I struggled to get out of bed, I felt rough. Barb said it served me right, and I swore to myself it would be the last time. During breakfast, Barb whimsically took a picture of her ring with her cell phone and texted Judy, sending her the photo as an attachment. She texted, you can call me Mom if you agree to be my maid of honor. Less than 10 minutes later, we were on a conference call with my 3 very excited daughters. They were all thrilled. We learned that James and Joan were dealing with the FBI on multiple levels and facing various possible charges. Their defense bills were climbing, and both of their careers were in jeopardy. James had DNA tests done on his 3 sons and found that they were all his. I guess all he was going through had created doubts in his own mind. It looked like their marriage was strained to its limit, and my 3 daughters felt it would be lucky to last another year. The money that funded it all had been traced back to James, who had it paid for through the trust, given legal authority to him after my fake death by Joan. It proved that their plans had started long before I caught them. Little did we know that in his warped mind, everything happening to him was my fault, and he still claimed he was being framed. Most thought he had lost all credibility. My trust, which had still not been settled, was now worth millions, and the lawyers would be fighting over it for months. I told them the court had put it into the hands of a trustee until the settlement came. The only problem we faced right now is that my 3 daughters wanted us to fly to New York for a family celebration. We agreed to come as soon as Barb's work schedule allowed it. All the girls were pushing for a date. I worked it out with the board, with my future bride's approval, to accept the position of CEO. Meetings would be held on the 2nd and 4th Friday of each month with secure conference calls 3 days a week. I wanted to limit my time away from Barb. She had become my world. Barb started her first day at the hospital and soon fit right in. Working in the ER in a small town allowed a lot of free time, so she began taking courses to further her career. She worked 4 12-hour days one week and 3 the next. Her hours were from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., so I made sure to have meals ready by the time she came home. Our friends got a kick out of how domesticated I was becoming. It made me wonder if they had ever had a clue about a bachelor's life. After our first 3 weeks, we flew out that Thursday night to New York so I could attend a press conference the following morning to announce my new position on the board. It was after that media event that I learned the court had ruled that all the changes made to my trust after the report of my false death were made illegally. The court ruled that I would have to pay James and Joan 19% of its current value. And if they wanted any of the personal property, they would have to buy it back at market value if I agreed to sell it. It was a huge blow for them. I instructed my lawyers to work out the details of the split, providing they got to keep their family home. After the conference, Barb and I went back to my parents' house where we learned my 3 daughters and Stephen would be joining us on Saturday. Mom and Dad wanted to give their own version of a welcome to the family. Although she had the staff, Barb cooked the meals. We had one big problem to solve: where we would get married and how we could satisfy our friends and family. By the end of the day, with my parents' help, we decided to get married in Ohio and have a second reception back here with family and their friends, along with a gathering with the crew back home. After everything was settled, I would ask Barb's brother, Measly Mike, to be my best man. Judy was Barb's maid of honor, and Jen and Joe would be the ladies-in-waiting. Stephen and her other brother would round out the wedding party. We set the date for the last Saturday in December because it had always been Barb's wish to be a December bride. We had just finished a delicious family dinner made by my mom when there was a knock at the front door. When my dad returned from answering it, we were surprised to find my former wife asking to talk to me. My gut told me no way, and so did my parents. Barb said, "You must forgive her before you can be free from the past." Connie told me about her actions and how your wisdom won them both over. It's time you applied your own wisdom to yourself. I went to Dad's office for a few moments before calling Joan. "Joan," I said before we began, "I want you to hear the last words I heard from you years ago. I was sitting in the judge's office when he spoke to you. Pay attention to the tone of your voice and what you said back then. Just so you know, I just emailed a statement to CNN confirming that I was there when the judge recorded it, and I listened to the conversation via speakers while you two were talking." Joan's face went pale. She now understood that I knew the whole truth. The mass media had never played the entire conversation. I excused myself to get a strong drink so she could have the privacy to hear her own words, as I remembered them that fateful day. I returned with a scotch and water, listening outside the door until the conversation between the judge and her was finished before going back into Dad's office. Imagine, if you can, that conversation from my side, as I listened to you deliberately write me out of my daughter's lives. Try to see it from my perspective: the cheating, the hurt, the pain, and the tears. Consider the price we all had to pay because you became my older brother's high-class partner. I have asked many times what James did during the 3 years he lived with us besides betraying me behind my back. What was it you famously told our daughter that the story about their dad's death was sad but true? But we can be thankful because it brought Uncle James to all of you. I said this coldly, with a firm voice. Did you ever say anything in our relationship that was 100% true? Jennifer, Judy, and Joe have all heard the same thing. They have even seen the date it was recorded and know it was before my reported death. The result is that they are now questioning everything James and you ever said to them. Listening to that tape has forever destroyed any trust they had in both of you. I told her, time appears to have proven that I was nothing more to James and you than a tool for you to use for your own ends. When Jennifer found me, I knew I could not be the Walking Dead anymore. It was time for me to reclaim my name, my family, and my life. The family secrets had to end. I stated this firmly. Joan looked shell-shocked. My words had struck her like arrows of steel. Tears were now flowing like a gentle spring rain. I had to wonder if it was caused by remorse or the shame of being caught. I got up from behind my dad's desk, handing her a box of tissues. Taking my drink in my hand, I left, saying I would give her time to gather her thoughts. Barb and my parents were in the living room when I walked in. My mom was showing Barb all the photos she had collected over the years. By the looks on her face, I can guess it's not going well, my father said. Well, she heard her own words to the judge and his response. Before I gave her a chance to speak, I told her to imagine how I must have felt, considering I was listening to the conversation on his speakerphone at the time. I asked her a few questions and she lost it, so I'm giving her time to collect her thoughts before we talk. I told her that her daughters had heard it all too, and saw that the conversation had taken place days before my reported death. I pointed out that her own words had destroyed any trust her daughters had in both of them. I came out because I did not want to watch her tears. Are you okay? Barb asked me with genuine concern. Just stating the facts, I said. It has given me an inner peace I have not felt in a long time. The rage, the anger I once had is gone. I can now accept whatever comes. It looked like Barb was right. Then, after refilling my drink, I walked back into the office and sat down, lighting a cigarette while I waited for her to begin. We saw you catching us as the brass ring. Finally, we would get what we had always dreamed, the chance to live, our lives beyond closed doors. When the judge called, James was in the kitchen with me. We both saw him interfering in what was not his business. His anger and rage drove my thoughts and my response. I really hadn't given my comments much thought, Joan said softly. You know the judge was right. Your father had been texted the video I took before the judge called him. Your father asked us to do nothing until he got there. Within the hour, he was in his plane flying down. When he heard the conversation, he himself went into shock. They both felt, as I did, that you had set everyone up. If it came out, their careers would be over and their reputations damaged beyond repair. When Jennifer heard it, she demanded we get our DNA tested to verify that what we believed was true. Thankfully, she was my biological daughter. Both would have reacted strongly if it had been different, I replied. Your comments made it clear that everything you two were doing was deliberate. Now you know why, to this day, your own father has had little to do with you. He told the whole family when he went home what had to be done and why. The question I have is what gave you the right to write me out of our children's lives? I have to ask because our daughters want to know. I stood up because her tears were starting to flow again and walked out. What are your thoughts? So far? Barb asked. She's trying to justify her actions. Nothing more, nothing less. She has shown no remorse and hasn't apologized. I feel the only thing she is sorry for is the fact that it has all come out, I said. Just looking at the three of them told me all I needed to know. They were as shocked as I was. We were all trying to figure out why she had come. We are both looking at doing time, Joan said when I came back into the room. The FBI has us on charges of lying to them, at least tax evasion, faking a death, theft, and a couple more, all involving your trust. Our lawyers are trying to work out a plea deal as we speak before we're officially charged. James and I both feel if you spoke up, they might not be as harsh. Sadly, to this point, they have not asked me a word. Why would they? I was in the forces overseas fighting for our freedom while others played their games, I said with a smile on my face. I really can't help you, can I? You made your bed. You lie in it. This is James and your mess. I have often asked myself if you were ever really in love with me. I now know you weren't. I guess you'll finally learn the hard way that there are consequences for your actions that money can't buy you out of. You haven't changed. I had hoped for her to apologize for what she had done, but she didn't. You came to try to save your own skin. It's always been about you and what you wanted, so please allow me the pleasure of escorting you out. I guess you'll both end up claiming it's not your fault. I could not stop laughing as she left the house. Mom and Dad were being just that. Barb and I had to sleep in separate beds, which made me realize just how attached Barb and I had become. There is nothing like the warmth of a body next to you in the middle of the night from a loved one that can calm a troubled soul. It was a night of tossing and turning, making me appreciate how much we had become one. It was about 2 a.m. when Barb sneaked into my room. When she said, "I couldn't sleep without you," it brought a smile to my face. I responded, "It's moments like this that make us feel young." As she climbed in beside me, I drew her into my arms. When she saw the tears in my eyes, she had to ask me why. I responded, "I finally understood what it meant to have a loving wife." It became a memory we would share and cherish for the rest of our lives. I guess my words hit home because Barb started to cry. I calmed her down with gentle kisses. "I need to know right now," she asked. "How do you feel about us having kids?" I paused before speaking, then said, "Kids have a unique way of keeping the old young at heart. If you can accept the fact that I will be in my 60s before the last of our brood is out of the house, I see no problem if we have more than one." "I guess it's time we started working on one," she said, and we did. Dad was already up when I went down. The whole bottom floor had the smell of fresh coffee in the air, bringing back memories of my childhood. It had always been his routine to brew coffee when he was off. I had to agree. Coffee made like that was richer and more flavorful than today's drip stuff. "Good morning," Dad said as I walked in to get a cup and join him at the table. "I want to thank Barb and you for ruining a good night's sleep." What was my reply? Your mom had to wake me up when Barb slipped into your room to ask me what I thought we should do. He laughed. I told her that you were both old enough to know what you were doing. I'm going to enjoy teasing her about it for weeks. Tell Mom that Barb and I really don't sleep well when we're apart. We learned that thanks to her last night, I replied, and let her know we were planning for her to have a couple more grandkids within a couple of years. Barb wants them close because of her age, Dad commented. I guess we will be looking for a home in SPM with me semi-retiring. Your mother will want to spend a lot of time being a grandmother again. Jennifer and Steve were the first to show up. Barb and I hadn't seen them since their wedding, and it gave us a chance to catch up. They were both thrilled to be part of our bridal party and told us about what they did on their honeymoon. Barb explained what happened when I met her parents, making sure to mention that I was quite cheerful during that encounter. Then playfully embarrassed me by showing them a video clip of her father, her brother, and I singing a song. The girls roared with laughter at that one. Even my dad cracked a smile. Steve found it amusing that Barb's dad had been my drill sergeant and her brother one of my trainees. Judy and Joanne showed up about an hour later. Judy was overjoyed when Barb asked her to be our maid of honor. Until then, she hadn't taken it seriously. They spent quite a while catching up on all the gossip from where she used to work and their mutual friends. Mom had to brag with joy about our plans to have children. And of course, Jennifer had to tell her sisters about my infamous video, which led to plenty of teasing on my part. Steve got Barb to send him a copy so he could forward it to his dad. Barb mentioned that with the building of the addition and her new job, we had been so busy we hadn't seen them since the first of the month. It should be finished by the end of the month. She explained that it was a 4-bay garage with a huge separate storage section behind it and a 3-bedroom apartment above. We have a fully enclosed walkway to the mudroom that will be attached to the house. It took them a week to level off the area before they could build. At the same time, we doubled the size of our leveled backyard and enlarged the patio, hoping to have it stained and sealed to match the house if the weather holds out. The excess soil and rock we removed were used to expand the level area in the front. It was then that I broke the news to my daughters that I had talked to their mother the night before. They all became quiet. Using Dad's internet and Barb's laptop, I played the audio clip of our chat through Dad's TV. I watched as they listened intently to the judge and Joan, then to my conversation with her afterward. I could tell my daughters were stunned. I don't believe it. There was no explanation, no guilt or remorse, yet she came expecting you to help them out because she felt you owed them, Joanne said, shaking her head. You asked her questions, which she completely ignored. It's sad that she's so self-centered that she cannot see what her own actions have done. Dad, Joan said. In her world, it appears that it is all about her. Was she always like that? I thought for a moment before replying. Before the birth of the 3 of you, I would have to say no. I remember my first leave home after your birth. Even though I was only home for 3 months, I could tell that something about her had changed. I wrote it off at first as her being overstressed, tired, and worn out because the 3 of you were a handful at times. That was when I hired your first full-time nanny and decided to leave the army so I could be home to help her with you all. By the time I got out, you were almost 3. We were strangers to each other, but soon she started to warm up. Now I see that for her, it was all a front. During that year, James had moved in and had gotten a job. He started his civilian life, and with Dad's help, I started building my company. I guess my relationship with her during that time was just the facade she hid behind as she built her future with him. That is why I asked her if she had ever been truthful to me. Honestly, it sounds like she had a mental breakdown caused by extreme depression after your births that she never sought help for, Judy said. Both Barb and I have seen that quite often in her line of work. One of the classic symptoms is a personality change. It's a way the mind helps them cope. That may explain what happened, but not her actions. Sadly, after all that has been done, this is the final straw. My mother and her 2 sisters agreed. I thought, this is just something else she can blame me for. I didn't know at that time how accurate that would turn out to be. To change the mood, Barb decided to get the ladies to help her choose the color of their dresses. I chimed in saying I would be wearing black. When I was asked why, I said, because black is the color for those grieving a loss. Jennifer had to ask what I would be losing. I replied, my freedom, which got a big groan. My dad saw me grab a beer and head outside to sort out my thoughts. He knew I had a lot on my mind, so he joined me. Son, I know it's hard to face. Don't try to second-guess yourself in what you did. You made the best decisions for all of us at that time based on what you knew. There's no good in looking back. Life is just too short. Count your blessings. 3 beautiful daughters who make their grandfather very proud. They carry your morals, principles, and standards well. A future wife who has a heart of gold. My father and mother split their estate between me and you while sidelining James. You served your country and saved many lives. You took the high road always in your walk in life. Even though you lost it all for a while, today you stand tall and proud, free to live your life as you see fit, he explained. Your daughters just wrote their mother out of their lives. They made hard choices just like you, my dad said wisely. With the same knowledge that should tell you that what you did was not wrong. It was your actions and your actions alone that brought your daughters home. They understand that regardless of the cost, you did what you did for the benefit of us all. That says it all. My dad always had a way of making me feel proud. His insightful words seemed to clear the fog in my mind, allowing me to have a clearer vision. Just think, you may end up with grandchildren older than their uncles and aunts, he added with a laugh. Not many get a second chance to do it better the second time. Focus on what's coming and leave the past behind. With a smile on my face, we walked back in and joined the rest of the family as they continued planning my wedding. Barb, my mom and my 3 daughters were now discussing what type of flowers to choose, whether it would be a church service or just a civil ceremony, and if there would be a Christmas theme. I shook my head. So Dad and I spent the rest of the afternoon playing crib for a penny a point, doubling the stakes for special circumstances. I ended up losing $465. Let them handle it, he said, and just show up at the wedding. It's the easiest way to stay out of trouble. He was right. On Sunday before we left, my mother had Barb call her mother to inform her that we would be getting married, and she was thrilled. Barb also made it clear that her future mother-in-law wanted to be involved in the planning. Dad overheard my mom on the phone say, "Don't worry about the cost. It's my husband and I's wedding gift to these two." And he rolled his eyes. The 2 mothers argued about it, but my mother put her foot down, and that was that. Ever since her teenage years, her close female friends had always called her Sarge. They did agree that everything had to be approved by Barb, which reinforced in my mind that I was marrying my mom's replica because Barb was the same way. The way things were coming together made me question whether Joan and I had truly been in love. As we flew home, Barb mentioned her parents were flying out. Mom wanted to discuss locations, menu options, which band to hire, and whatever else she could think of to complicate matters further. They wanted to see what kind of life we led daily. We didn't even have to pick them up. Barb's dad was renting a truck so they could do day trips from our house while they toured the island. It was something he had always wanted to do, and now they had the chance. With just over 2 months until the wedding, time was catching up to us quickly. We returned home to find that the dive had burned down, so Tuesday morning found me sitting with the owner who had no insurance and was not going to rebuild. I offered him fair market value for the property, and we negotiated the liquor license until we worked out a deal, provided the local council would approve it. Within 3 days, the mayor granted the approval, and by the end of the week, they began construction on the site. The contractors and builders were excited. They were constructing a back-to-back restaurant and bar that would take up a city block, using in part more logs from the mill and a concrete floor with the 2 businesses, sharing a common interior wall. Everyone was impressed, and using plans approved by the village, they said they would have the outside completed in 2 weeks. Former staff agreed to work in the bar and were thrilled by its new name, Bullfrogs. Using the nearest real estate agent, we had the restaurant space leased before they were done. I hired a firm out of Seattle to design the layout of the bar and to set it up. I paid extra for a rush job. I got Barb to have her mother scan her favorite picture of Barb in uniform and email it to us. I used that image to have a glass company design the main entrance doors with her full image etched on each door along with the bar's name displayed prominently. Barb had ordered the furniture for the new apartment, and during the month, she and our moms had pretty much settled everything about the wedding. The day before her parents arrived, everything was done. That Thursday night, the new bar had its grand opening, which was more successful than the old one had ever been. Everyone raved about our bar food menu, which made Barb smile because she had planned out the items, giving them unique names. We had 31 days until the wedding. Barb's parents would arrive around 5:00 that Friday night. So I was surprised to find out that morning that Barb wanted me to drive her over to the regional airport in Port, insisting we take the Jeep. We had to be there at 2 Sao Hine. I asked her why, and she said it was a surprise. We arrived at the airport at 10 minutes to 2 in the afternoon and watched a small 6-seater jet fly in. I learned something new. My dad flew his own plane. They both looked great. We had gotten my parents settled in and were sharing beers when Barb's parents arrived. After getting them settled, it was too late to start dinner, so we drove them down to our new bar. I took Barb's parents in my old Ford truck and let them drive. My future mother-in-law said my truck reminded her of the one her husband had when they were first dating. Barb followed us in the Jeep, which had become her pride and joy. When we arrived at the bar, Bull was completely surprised to see his full image on the main doors twice. It blew him away. My dad, standing beside me, whispered softly, "Well, done." I said to Bull, "When you walk in, I want you to give the order like you did when you wanted us recruits in formation." He agreed to humor me. As he walked in after opening the door, he let loose with his order in a roar, as if we were all standing in front of him. 16 former Marines quickly fell into formation and saluted him one more time. He had trained every one of them. He walked down the line and shook their hands, greeting them one by one with their full names. Gloria looked at me, her face glowing with pride, and said, "You know you'll have to carry him home." I nodded and laughed. Barb kissed me and said, "I love you," then told her mother that she had no idea I had named our new bar after her dad. Charlie had refused to tell me because he wanted it to be a surprise. Bull was taken aback when he saw the plaque on the wall above the bar that read, "Named after the toughest drill sergeant of them all, Bullfrog Patterson." We all tried Barb's menu that night and agreed the food was excellent for a bar. Dad and I had to carry Bull up the stairs to his bed. His former recruits had gotten him quite intoxicated. It would be discussed for weeks how much nicer he was when he wasn't in command. Bull would say for years it was the second time in his life he'd been shocked and awed. The first was when I asked for his daughter's hand. As my parents and I were relaxing in the living room, reflecting on the day's events, Gloria dropped the news that Bull was being pushed into retirement after 40 years of service and was at a crossroads in his life. Mike was taking over the family farm at the end of the year, and they were planning to move into town. Bull was taking it hard. He still had too much fire in him to retire. I looked into Barb's eyes and saw her growing concern. "You know, Barb," I said, "if he lived here, he would be the perfect choice to manage the bar." Gloria replied, "But where would we live? There's not much available." Barb, with a huge smile, said, "We have the in-law suite if Dad will agree to it. I should warn you, though, the thunderstorms here can be loud and wild." Her mom looked at her and said, "How do you manage them? Ever since you were a small child, when we had a bad storm, you would crawl into our bed." A smile came across Barb's face as she looked at me knowingly. "Charlie has helped me make them one of my favorite things," she said with a huge grin. My parents caught the inner meaning and both started to laugh. Over the next few days, as Gloria and Bull toured the island, my parents, John and Silva, spent their time looking for a new residence. We still hadn't disclosed our plans to Bull. Gloria wanted to see how he felt about the area before we made the official offer. The furniture finally arrived, and Barb and I were busy unpacking it and setting it all out when Barb noticed an official-looking car coming around the last curve in the driveway. We both went out to meet it. It was the FBI looking for me. They wanted to talk to me alone, but I made it clear that since I had nothing to hide from my future wife, I would prefer to talk with her present. So we found ourselves sitting at the kitchen table sharing coffee. The agent, who identified himself as Peter McCormick, had some troubling news. There had been 2 arrests last week. My brother James was under arrest for fraud, tax evasion, falsifying a death, attempted murder, theft, and third-degree assault on his wife. He had been denied bail. Joan had filed for divorce and was facing a bunch of charges herself, but she had been granted bail because of their kids. The problem was that an informer had come forward to disclose that James had been trying to gather information about who could be hired for a contract job and may have succeeded. They wanted my schedule and plans for the next 2 months while the situation was being investigated. I noticed Barb's face turned pale. They were taking this seriously because the trust had a clause that stated, if I got divorced and died within 6 months of that date, my trust would be controlled by my former wife. Lawyers had agreed that until the trust was split and approved by the court, I could not legally change anything in it. Agents had been assigned to the area to investigate matters, and they made it clear that I could not change my daily agenda in any way. Barb and I understood they were taking the matter very seriously. After they left, we sat and discussed how we were going to break the news to my parents and what steps we could take to protect ourselves. It was the last Saturday the 6 of us would be together until the wedding. My parents had found a 5-acre lot outside of port and had finalized the deal. Their real estate agent had linked them to a local contractor who had agreed to build them a log home a bit bigger than ours on a 4-foot crawl space. They had ordered a custom kit online which would be delivered to the building site in 3 weeks. But my dad was not looking forward to heading back home. He had found the slower pace of our small town living quite pleasant. Barb, her parents, and I were sitting in the living room while my parents were out. I asked him, "Bull, how much will you be taking from the farm when you move to town?" He answered, "We really haven't given it much thought. Honestly, I don't like the idea of having neighbors 200 yards away." "Why, Dad," Barb said, "Charlie and I were wondering if you would consider moving here and managing the bar for us. You both could live in the in-law suite. The salary would start at $60,000 a year." To say he was shocked would be an understatement, but he promised to think about it. We told him to take his time and let us know when he decided. Gloria later told her daughter she thought it was a done deal because Bull was very proud of that bar. He just had to accept in his mind what was already in his heart. As they worked in the kitchen preparing a big dinner, they talked about what Gloria wanted to bring with her. The 4 of us watched them drive off, heading back to Ohio. As we headed back into the house, I told my parents we needed to talk. It broke my mother's heart when I told them about the FBI's visit. She blamed herself for not raising James right. I shared the advice the judge had given me and pointed out that he had led a good life until he got involved with my former wife. "Remember, Mom, you taught us to associate with those who would build us up, not take us down. It's standing by my morals and principles that you raised us with that have kept me balanced and strong." James just threw away his chance. "Well, Mom and Dad," Barb said, "I've got some good news that may cheer you up. But you have to promise me that you will keep it to yourselves. I looked at Barb with a puzzled expression, wondering what she had to say. My parents agreed. My doctor figures that by the time we get married, I will only have 32 weeks to go, Barb said with glee. If it's a girl, it will be Gloria Elizabeth. If it's a boy, Jonathan Charles Barnes IV. I thought my mother would scream. I almost fainted. So here it was, a day before my wedding. Bullfrog, Measly Mike, my dad, and all the other men in my bridal party were at the Legion, sharing a few drinks after going through the rehearsal. Women were somewhere else throwing Barb a bridal party. Bull was saying goodbye to many of his friends and getting quite a bit of attention as he prepared to leave Ohio and move to Washington State to manage a bar named after him. James's plan had been foiled. The contractor for the job was caught after pleading guilty and received a hard 20. Joan had struck a deal for time served and 5 years of parole by agreeing to testify against her husband. His trial would start in the new year. The trust had been settled, and Joan had put the estate she lived in with her 3 sons up for sale and had filed for divorce. The last 2 of our 4 children were starting kindergarten next month. Jonathan first, Gloria 10 months after, and then the twins, Silva and Wilford. Bullfrog's real name was Wilford, by the way. Jennifer and Stephen had a boy and a girl. Judy married a Marine from Maine who works in a corporation under me, and Joe married Measly Mike. They opened a Bullfrog's bar near the farm. Life is better the second time around. And as this story quietly slips away into the shadows of your mind, dissolving into the silent spaces where memory and mystery entwine, understand that this was never just a story. It was an awakening, a raw pulse of human truth wrapped in whispered secrets and veiled emotions. Every word a shard of fractured reality. Every sentence a bridge between worlds seen and unseen, between the light of revelation and the dark abyss of what remains unsaid. It is here, in this liminal space, that stories breathe their most potent magic, stirring the deepest chambers of your soul, provoking the unspoken fears, the buried desires, and the fragile hopes that cling to your heart, like fragile embers. This is the power of these tales, these digital confessions whispered into the void where anonymity becomes the mask for truth, and every viewer becomes the keeper of secrets too heavy to carry alone. And now that secret, that trembling echo of someone else's reality, becomes part of your own shadowed narrative, intertwining with your thoughts, awakening that undeniable curiosity, the insatiable hunger to know what lies beyond, what stories have yet to be told, what mysteries hover just out of reach, waiting for you to uncover them. So hold on to this feeling, this electric thread of wonder and unease, for it is what connects us all across the vast unseen web of human experience. And if your heart races, if your mind lingers on the what-ifs and the maybes, then you know the story has done its work. Its magic has woven itself into the fabric of your being. So before you step away from this realm, remember this. Every story you encounter here is a whispered invitation to look deeper, to listen harder, to embrace the darkness and the light alike. And if you found yourself lost, found yourself changed, even slightly, then honor this connection by keeping the flame alive. Like this video, if the story haunted you. Subscribe to join the fellowship of seekers who chase the unseen truths and ring the bell to be the first to greet the next confession, the next shadow, the next revelation waiting to rise from the depths. Because here we don't merely tell stories, we summon them. We become vessels for the forgotten, the hidden, and the unspoken. And you, dear listener, have become part of this sacred ritual. So until the next tale finds you in the quiet hours, keep your senses sharp, your heart open, and never stop chasing the whispers in the silence. Thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.